Obviously busy day, busy time period. Kicked off. I know last time I spoke, I was not necessarily indicative that we were going to get Geeky and some of the other contracts done, but as I often reference, sometimes 1-2 conversations and the deal finds its own timeline. So we're very happy to have that in place, along with a few of the other players that we could sort of start to identify how we were going to fill out our roster and explore, every opportunity. And I referenced that it would be through trade or through free agency. And we did a little bit of both, obviously testing the marketplace in terms of where we were, in Victor's case, happy to welcome him, his competitiveness, improving the power play. Marco and Steve Spott consulted, quite a bit when we identified he obviously was available, but Marco had him in LA, so it was a plug and play in what we felt he was capable of doing and bringing to the hockey club. And again, it was an area of goal scoring that we felt that may or may not present during the the free agency time frame that we were under. And then we went to work on finding, as I referenced, last week, that we were going to put together a competitive team with bringing some juice back in here. And that applies to bringing our, the elevating our current guys and them feeling reinvigorated coming off of some injuries and a very down year. And, just the responses I've had from those guys and realizing how excited some of these guys are to get here. And maybe it is from the bottom up, but the juice is coming and we expect to be a much more competitive team. And the improvements now come from within. But make no mistake, if a younger player has the opportunity to make our team, he's making our team. I think we did that, 2 years ago, and Poitras is a good example of making room. There's room. There's just the competition is there, and that's what we want. That's what I talked to Marco about through the whole coaching search, and even leading on the whole days leading up to today. So I'll take all questions if you care.
How much was just being harder to play against an element of some of the players that you brought into free agency and just in general, this offseason going into?
I think we've always been a team since I've been here that prides ourselves in that, and that's defensive structure I talked about. We were, at times last year, even when we had our group, we were an easy out, and I can't stand for that. So we are going to reestablish that, and I said that's part of again, when you have iconic players and people that are driven that we've had the fortune of having and leading our group here for a long period of time, the next group needs to really, really embrace that. We had injuries, there was a factor involved in that, but now we've infused that. We have guys that are self-starters. We have guys that are going to show up in practice. We have guys that are going to show up when the whistle blows and drag people in with them. And if they aren't dragged in, then they won't play.
Obviously had that first year where he looked like he was going to be, premier power forward, but the scoring hasn't followed him. Can he get that back? How do you view him as a player?
Yeah, obviously he popped, a few years ago. He's had some injuries since then that have, probably derailed a little bit in that regard. I don't know if he's getting back to scoring 27 goals. I sure hope so. Deep down, we believe he'll bring a lot more energy to our group that we need. The physicality is there. We run through a tough division. I just think everybody gets a little taller. I think if we fast forward, what we've tried to do from a draft perspective, an eye towards that as well, and introducing those young players that we hopefully are infusing skill. I do believe that the complement that Tanner brings will help in that regard as we move forward in improving our organizational depth and talent.
Looking at a guy like Blue Mountain, how do you guys identify a player like that, and do you think he can translate to the NHL level and impact?
Well, he and Alex both, they've done what they needed to do at the American Hockey League level in scoring at a high level and with consistency. There are a number of players around the league that have gone through this, and when they got their advantage, they've taken, got their opportunity, they've taken advantage of it. The conversations we have with both Mate and Alex were, if you're going to score at the National Hockey League level, we want you here, not anywhere else. So we provided that opportunity today, and they're excited about it. And I said, if they take the job of somebody that believes they're an incumbent, that's what happens in the National Hockey League when a guy gets passed, and the internal competition start that we discussed organizationally, we needed to get back to having, and we're hoping they're going to take advantage of that opportunity.
When it comes to Isamon, what were the things that he brings to the table that you appreciate?
A lot of juice there. The forecheck ability, to get down ice. He's also chipped in his fair amount of goals. We're going to have to probably give a little bit of and put a little bit of trust into these guys building their penalty killing, at a little more of a consistent level. And that will be an area that we're going to tease out of Mikey and probably Tanner, who has done it in the past as well. So we can spread that around. Obviously we lost, some key guys in that regard, and you can't just roll over Lindy and Pav and, the same guys, especially when they're playing in elevated roles as well. So we're going to spread that around. But the juice, the competitiveness, everybody you've talked to in terms of how Mikey shows up to practice every day, he's a pain in the ass, and I want to be a pain in the ass, for us.
To reach the level of offense that you need to be as competitive as you want to be, are there guys that have to hit levels they've never hit before or not hit recently? And are you counting on some guys have career years offensively to kind of get that offense where you want it?
Well, what's interesting, last year we fell woefully short, but we were tracking to be short, partway through the year when we made that transition. We never, ever forecasted that somebody was having a career year. And I think that's fool's gold. Obviously, if they do, good on them. In Kiki's case, he got paid. So we're not rooting against them either. In that regard, the group itself, if the power play comes back online and they're feeling better about themselves in that regard, I think there'll be enough around. But, that's the area that if you look at the group that we're saying, okay, we got to tease it out. And we have to. Now you have to be healthy as well. But if you look at LA, you look at Minnesota, you look at the teams that, didn't lead the league in scoring, they still generated enough. They found a way to score enough, and, they're in the playoffs. So at the end of the day, I told you all along, we need to be a more competitive team, and offensively we have to find a way to, Steve Spott will be a big part of that, and improving our power play. And if we have to find a little bit more during the course of the season, we have some space to do that. We have some draft capital to do that. And if we're in position, I think you guys know that I've generally had a pretty aggressive mindset, and we'll try and complement that.
How would you just characterize this year's particular market?
Talent-wise, or you talking the contract-wise? Can you expand on that question just a little bit, Fluto?
It seemed narrow compared to perhaps years of past when we saw so many guys re-up before it.
I think you saw it as well. I mean, Florida took three primary players, by bringing them back off of the free agent market. You don't know, if somebody was thinking of an offer sheet on Geeky, that disappeared. So, end of the day, you get to July 1, and you see who's there to be able to bring in, attract. Like, it all has to happen. You're hopefully sort of doing your due diligence around the league and knowing who's available. Trade scenarios, being on one, and all of a sudden he's traded because everybody else is seeing the same thing. That happens. That's happened over the last couple of days to some of us. And, that's where we, took the opportunity to bring on Victor, and we're happy for that.
Did teams fear the offer sheet more this year than in past years, with yourself signing, Geeky before July 1, Toronto signing Nice, New York signed Cooley today?
I think everybody has to be a little more cognizant of it. As I said, I think last week as well, the flexibility, the cap going up, I think it took away a little bit, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, the RFAs, you got to have both sides cooperate, because sometimes they may delay it and take it past it, and you never know. You just don't. But I think everybody was a little more aggressive in trying to get their RFAs done, just to avoid it and know what you had, to spend elsewhere.
What's the hope, I guess, from a production standpoint for a guy like Geeky after signing for that contract?
Well, we hope he goes back to 33 ultimately. If he's still playing with Pasta, depends on where he is on the power play. So there are things that may affect that. The shooting percentage was certainly at his highest level. So does that regress a little bit? It may. He's now averaged 25 goals over the last 2 years, so he was not. It wasn't barren last year either, in his first year here. So he shoots the puck. He's got a lot more confidence now. He can play with he proved now he can play and complement, a star player in the National Hockey. All those things sort of feed into, hopefully now he scores with consistency. And, I hope he remains a 30-goal scorer. Ultimately, that's what we want and we need.
What was the process like bringing Corelli back, and what was your conversation like with him?
Sean was really excited today, to be coming back. He knows what we're trying to do. He's been here and grown up as a player in the National Hockey League, cutting his teeth under leadership. He's now in that leadership category. He's, he knows a lot of these guys. It's plug and play for him to infuse, again, the energy piece of it. There's a penalty killing. There's a stability aspect to Sean. He can play a little bit up and down, both, left wing and center. He's good on draws. He's also a guy that takes a lot of pride, in professionalism on and off the ice. We had great knowledge of him. And, when it aligns the fact that he was excited about returning, I think it aligns pretty well for us.
What you know of Victor's game from having seen him and what Marco is suggesting, having worked with him, how best does he fit into the power play?
Net front, he's got some grease there. Knows timing is also part of the net front. Most of the guys that are effective there, they get their stick on a lot of pucks. It's not by coincidence they're in the right spots when the rebound is there. He has a good feel for that. He's got courage as well. He's not the biggest guy, but he's played the same way his whole career, and he's produced. He recovers pucks well, and that's also a part of that net front ability. So we know, and even talking to Spotter about how he's going to make some tweaks. When the puck gets to a certain spot, the guys all know it's going to the net. And that's what we have to have a little more. I talked about before, having a little more consistency in executing our plans. And, Victor's been a part of that. He's played in the OC situation. He knows when a puck's gone up top in situations it's going to the net. So I think we'll have a little more. We're going to try to build continuity into that and have a plan in place, and hopefully he takes advantage of that opportunity.
Your analysis of the power play's dysfunction last year, was it mostly net front? Was it failure to shoot? Was it not getting rhythm, not finding passing? The whole basket.
It was. It started with entries. To tell you the truth, we were not as consistent as you need to be. And even that is if it requires a chip or a dump, like your group has to be on the same page in that regard. You can't just hope the guy's going to make a high end play on every entry situation, but you have to be connected. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're going to try and refocus on. And the same thing, when the puck is, teams are killing in a certain way. If they're taking away pasta, you have to execute on the other side. But when that puck comes up top, it's supposed to go, to the net, because that's what they're giving you. And again, getting connected and spending some time now with Spotter and him talking about the players he's worked in Dallas and why it worked, and now being excited about, taking Charlie and Mason, and sort of, and Hampus even. Those are the things that you realize, like, we weren't executing at the level you need to be successful, and we need to do a better job. We have to take ownership of that. Our players have to take ownership of it. And, the funny part about it was they were top 15 power play the year before, 4 out of the 5 guys. But other teams made adjustments, and they didn't. They didn't do a good enough job. They're more than capable. We just have to do a better job being connected and executing what we're supposed to.
As you conceptualize what this might look like on the ice come October, say the puck is in the offensive zone, you're on the forecheck, based on what you were able to bring in today, how do you want guys to follow the scheme?
Yeah, I mean, that's Marco's, and he'll be the first to say, like, listen, he now has a bit of a blueprint of the players that he gets to get a hold of and how they're going to play. So those guys already sat today in terms of, okay, if this is how they're mapping out the lines are going to go, what are we capable of doing? And now he still has his own structure and systems that everybody's going to play. It's the one thing, and even Marco's introduction to the development kids, and understanding if you're playing the right way, you're going to play. You're going to get an opportunity to play for Marco Sturm. Very direct, succinct in how he's going to approach things. That's going to be across the board. And that, again, is being connected, executing to the point where you are supposed to put pucks in certain times and areas. He's going to reinforce those things. So if you're supposed to play behind, you're going to play behind. And you're going to forecheck the hell out of it and puck recovery side of things. We're just going to try to, and everybody will be across the board. Now, some guys can execute at a much higher level. They'll get a little more rope. That's happened in every team. The best players generally get that. The other guys got to buy in and realize that they're going to contribute. But it has to come from our whole group. The offense has to come that way.
Bring back Yogi Haru on the right side, you on the right side, is the expectation that one of them is going to be able to run with a top 4 role.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, Charlie will be healthy. Knock on wood, he stays that way. I think that starts to slot guys in terms of what they're able to do and whatever the matchups are a particular night. Henry's already proven he can play with a couple different partners. So Leachy and Marco will figure out who's best suited to complement each other.
We've talked about Arvidsson and bringing him in, a lot of the focus on the power play. Do you feel like you have enough in the tank right now, 5-on-5, talent-wise, to score enough goals to get back to that level like you're talking about, just beyond the power play success?
I think that's the area that we're going to have to make sure we're executing at, in the style Marco wants to play. If there's a deficiency of any club starting the year, you point to that and say, hey, this group's going to have to work hard to score the goals, and put it together. They're all capable. Arby's capable of scoring 20 goals. Geeks now is capable of scoring 30. That doesn't mean I'm anointing them at the high sides of their careers. But I do believe when you put the whole group together and what they're capable of doing, we'll score enough if we play the right way. And we'll defend a hell of a lot better. And I expect our goaltending to be significantly better.
In April, you were confident the injured guys would be all healthy come camp?
Yeah.
Still confident?
Yeah, very confident, minus the obvious of having an injury between now and then.
Is Hampus on the ice yet?
Yeah.
With Tanner, you mentioned the physicality. Just what gives you the confidence to give him the term, the 5-year term, given his rugged play style?
Again, I think I mapped out the fact that we want the infusion rate now and playing forward. I think it's hard to find. I really do. And I think that the younger skilled players that we plan to incorporate moving forward are going to need a little breathing room. And I think Tanner's going to bring a lot of that. I think the room itself, his leadership skills, how he prepares to play the game, I think that all just boils over into what we need to continue to improve upon. And also support, as I've referenced before, you got David and Charlie in particular that are stepping into leadership situations. They've been, assistant captains and such. But there's a lot that goes into, being at that upper echelon level of leadership and what's required of you, along with being an elite player in the National Hockey League. Zdeno, Berge, obviously Marsh, like those guys did it. And they learned from it, but now they're going through it the first time. I think bringing in more players that are capable of providing outlets and relief in that sense, plays a big part of what team success is all about.
What are you hoping for from Jordan Harris?
Good skating, puck moving, plays both sides. You look at what the group needs from depth and how we're going to get pushed when guys aren't necessarily playing where injuries come. Mike Callahan, a little different flavor, probably a little more of the PK and stiffness side of things. Got his feet wet last year. Soderstrom, puck moving, has a little power play acumen. So you look at the blend of guys that are going to compete for that spot and that depth and provide. Everybody knows you need insulation as a defenseman. As a group overall throughout the year. So I think Jordan will push. For playing time and happy to bring him on board.
So much of how every team in the league goes is based on how their 5 or 6 core players play. You've got your 5 or 6 core players. How do you hope those 5 or 6 core players today interpret the handful of moves you made?
That we've tried to support them with infusing the energy and hopefully physicality and the ready-to-go mentality. I referenced before to be a harder out, to be in the fight, to drag people in. I think they know now that we've tried to support them, when they're trying to lead the charge. You guys have been around to watch Charlie every once in a while, the wires cross and he's going to try and line somebody up and David fighting, Tachuk. Like, these guys are all in. But you need foot soldiers to go along with them to support the endeavors that they have, both at the highest competitive level, but also executing at that level. I think we've done a job today. Do we have a surprise or two with a younger player or a Blumel or a Steves that can provide some secondary scoring for us? That's what needs to play out.
Was his kind of experience with Blumel important as far as helping you know that, or convincing you guys that he's a guy that his offensive skills will translate from?
Well, he had knowledge that, from inside the locker rooms and communication in Dallas's system, he didn't have a great opportunity. Dallas was a really deep team, and he had a few games. Did he play in an elevated role that he plays in Texas? No. So we're going to take a peek at that. Because that's what, in Spotter's case, he's not rubber stamping a player that's going to come up here and score at the same level. But what he's saying is if you put him in situations, where he's on an elbow in the power play and that's where he scores from there, you have to see that. You have to put some of those players in those situations so that you're able to see whether or not they actually get at the next level as well. Otherwise, you're just not going to know.
You mentioned the confidence of the goaltending bouncing back. Obviously, a lot of focus there is on Jeremy, but behind him, Jonas and DiPietro re-signed. How do you look at that situation and how that may play out in camp?
Again, Jonas was honest at the end of the year in saying that he believed we should have utilized him more, and especially maybe when Jeremy was struggling. And I was honest; I didn't disagree with him. And we've gone over that as a staff to recognize that, when a player's playing well enough, he maybe deserves the net, and regardless who it is. In Michael's case, he had a tremendous year. He was AHL goalie of the year. We felt that, him still being young enough, there's growth potential in Michael as well. Michael comes and pushes, maybe it makes the decision even harder for all of us in terms of, but that's what we're trying to make sure we're driving. It should be uncomfortable. We missed by a wide margin. We need to be better. So every guy walking through the door or recognizing today we were trying to accomplish, that's what they should be focused on for the rest of the summer and coming in September.
Do you feel like that goalie room is perhaps more in unison than it was at the end of the year when he's being honest about wanting to play more? Do you feel like everyone kind of knows the expectations or the situation maybe a bit better now looking at next year?
Jeremy missed camp, so he didn't really start out with Corpy in that regard. I like the fact that Corpy flat out said, I deserve to play more. No, his play has to back that up as well. So they're supportive, they're competitive, and they're supportive in the same regard. So hopefully they've learned and they're moving forward, but they want them to stay competitive and stay connected in that regard. And I want Michael to realize if he's good enough to play, he should play.